From a deleted interracial love scene that shocked test audiences to Bob Dylan's bizarre claim he imagined Denzel Washington while writing the song decades earlier, the Mighty Quinn harbors secrets stranger than any Caribbean murder mystery. This tropical thriller's journey from a shelved Sammy Davis Jr. project to its final cut is packed with peculiar production mishaps and fascinating oddities. Fact 1. The film took 17 years to make. The Mighty Quinn had one of the longest journeys from page to screen in Hollywood history, taking 17 years to finally reach theaters. The story begins back in 1971 when producer Robert Rosenthal first optioned the rights to the novel Finding Mobby and immediately saw its potential as a star vehicle. He initially wanted to create a showcase for two of the biggest African American stars of that era, the legendary entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. and the powerhouse actor Lou Gossett Jr. Both actors were attached to the project, and the screenplay was commissioned with them in mind, but the film never made it past the development stage. Hollywood in the early 1970s simply wasn't ready to greenlight a Caribbean-set mystery thriller with an all-black lead cast, despite the commercial success both Davis and Gossett had achieved in their careers. The project was shelved and sat dormant for over a decade and a half, gathering dust while the industry slowly changed around it. By the time cameras finally rolled in 1988, both original stars had aged out of their roles, and an entirely new generation of talent had emerged. Denzel Washington, who was just 16 years old when the project was first conceived, stepped into the lead role that might have belonged to Sammy Davis Jr. The long delay actually worked in the film's favor in some ways, as the industry had become more receptive to films featuring predominantly black casts, and Washington brought a different kind of charisma and intensity to the role than Davis would have delivered. What started as a passion project in the Nixon administration finally hit theaters during the Reagan era, making it one of the most delayed productions in cinema history. Fact 2. Test audiences confused the star. The Mighty Quinn wasn't always called the Mighty Quinn, and the reason for the last-minute title change reveals how studios rely heavily on audience testing to make critical marketing decisions. The film was originally titled Finding Mobby, which was the exact name of the source novel by A.H.Z. Carr. This made perfect sense from a literary adaptation standpoint, as the plot centers on Police Chief Xavier Quinn's search for his childhood friend Mobby, who becomes the prime suspect in a murder investigation. However, when the studio held test screenings with the original title, they discovered a significant problem that nobody had anticipated. Multiple audience members walked out of the theater believing that Robert Townsend, who played the elusive character Mobby, was actually the star of the film rather than Denzel Washington. The confusion stemmed from the way the opening credits were structured and the title itself, which seemed to suggest that Finding Mobby was the main character's journey rather than Quinn being the protagonist. Focus groups revealed that casual moviegoers who weren't familiar with the cast assumed the title character must be the lead, and since Mobby's name was front and center, they gave Townsend credit for carrying the film. This was particularly problematic because Denzel Washington was the draw for the movie, and the studio needed audiences to know he was the star. Rather than risk losing Washington's box office appeal due to marketing confusion, the decision was made to retitle the film after the Bob Dylan song that plays over the opening credits. The name change clarified who the protagonist was, while also capitalizing on the famous Dylan track, solving both the confusion problem and creating a more marketable title in one move. Fact 3. Blade Runner's writer penned the script. One of the most surprising creative connections behind The Mighty Quinn involves the screenwriter, whose previous work couldn't have been more different from this sunny Caribbean mystery. Hampton Fancher, who adapted the novel Finding Mobby for the screen, was already legendary in Hollywood for co-writing the screenplay for Blade Runner in 1982. That dark, rain-soaked science fiction masterpiece about artificial humans in a dystopian Los Angeles became one of the most influential films of the decade, known for its philosophical depth and noir atmosphere. So when Fancher turned his attention to a tropical island murder mystery filled with reggae music and Caribbean sunshine, it marked one of the most dramatic genre shifts any screenwriter has ever made between projects. The transition from exploring what it means to be human through replicants in a future hellscape to crafting a character-driven mystery about friendship and corruption in Jamaica showcases Fancher's remarkable versatility as a writer. What connects both films, however, is Fancher's gift for creating morally complex protagonists who must navigate worlds where nothing is quite as it seems. Just as Blade Runner's Rick Deckard questioned his own identity while hunting replicants, Xavier Quinn must confront his past and his loyalty to a childhood friend while pursuing justice. Fancher brought the same attention to character depth and moral ambiguity to the Mighty Quinn that made Blade Runner such a thought-provoking experience, even if the settings couldn't be more opposite. The fact that the same writer could craft both the neon-lit future of Los Angeles 2019 and the vibrant beaches of a fictional Caribbean island demonstrates the kind of range that's rare in Hollywood screenwriting. It also shows that great storytelling fundamentals translate across any genre or setting when a writer understands human nature and moral complexity. Fact 4. The novel won a posthumous Edgar Award. The source material for The Mighty Quinn carries one of the saddest backstories in mystery fiction history. Albert H. Z. Carr wrote Finding Mauby as his first and only mystery novel, completing the manuscript and sending it to publishers before his death in 1971. The novel was published posthumously, meaning Carr never got to see his book in print or read reviews from critics and readers. What makes this even more tragic is that Finding Mauby went on to win the 1972 Edgar Award for Best First Mystery Novel, which is the highest honor in mystery writing, presented by the Mystery Writers of America. The Edgar Awards are considered the Oscars of the mystery genre, and winning one as a debut author is an extraordinary achievement that launches careers. But Albert Carr never knew he was an Edgar Award winner, never got to give an acceptance speech, and never experienced the validation that comes from having your peers recognize your work as exceptional. His family accepted the award on his behalf, but the triumph was bittersweet, since the man who created Xavier Quinn and Mauby wasn't there to celebrate. The novel impressed judges with its vivid Caribbean setting, complex friendship at its core, and the way it addressed issues of loyalty and justice in a small island community. Carr's background as an economist and presidential advisor gave him insights into power structures and corruption that informed the story's political undertones. The fact that Hollywood took another 17 years to adapt his prize-winning novel means that Carr died nearly 2 decades before seeing his characters brought to life on screen. It's a reminder that artistic recognition and success sometimes come too late, and that some writers never get to witness the full impact of their creative work on audiences and other artists. Fact 5. Bob Dylan's psychic connection. Claim. Bob Dylan's relationship with the Mighty Quinn film contains one of the most bizarre claims in his entire career of strange statements and mysterious pronouncements. The movie takes its title from Dylan's song, The Mighty Quinn, which he wrote and recorded back in 1967, more than 20 years before the film was made. The song became a hit when covered by the British band Manfred Mann, and it's been a staple of Dylan's catalog ever since, even though nobody has ever quite figured out what the lyrics actually mean. But here's where things get weird. In Dylan's 2004 memoir, Chronicles Volume 1, he describes watching the Mighty Quinn film years after its release and having an eerie moment of recognition. According to Dylan, when he saw Denzel Washington playing Xavier Quinn on screen, Washington was exactly how Dylan had imagined the character when he originally wrote the song in the 1960s. Dylan claimed that Washington's portrayal matched his mental image from decades earlier, suggesting some kind of prophetic vision or psychic connection between his songwriting and the film that would eventually use his song as its title. This statement is genuinely strange for several reasons. First, Dylan wrote The Mighty Quinn in 1967 when Denzel Washington was only 12 years old and had never acted in anything. Second, Dylan's song lyrics don't describe any character remotely similar to a Caribbean police chief investigating a murder, making it unclear what exactly he was imagining. The song's Quinn seems to be some kind of mystical figure who comes around to feed pigeons and make everything right, which doesn't match the film's protagonist at all. Most Dylan scholars believe the song was actually inspired by the Anthony Quinn film The Savage Innocents, making the connection even more confusing. Whether Dylan genuinely experienced this strange premonition or was simply engaging in his trademark enigmatic mythology building remains an unsolved mystery. Fact 6. Deleted interracial love scene. The Mighty Quinn lost one of its most significant scenes to audience prejudice during the test screening process, revealing uncomfortable truths about American attitudes toward interracial romance even in the late 1980s. The original cut of the film included an intimate kissing scene between Denzel Washington's character, Xavier Quinn, and Mimi Rogers' character, Elgin Miller, a wealthy white American woman living on the island. The scene was filmed and initially included in the version shown to test audiences, but the studio discovered that viewers weren't ready for what they were seeing on screen. Both black and white audience members reacted negatively to the interracial coupling, with focus group feedback indicating discomfort with the romantic chemistry between the two characters. This surprised the filmmakers, who had assumed that by 1988, audiences would be more accepting of interracial relationships in mainstream films. But the data from multiple test screenings was consistent and clear, so the studio made the decision to cut the intimate scenes between Washington and Rogers, toning down their relationship to something more ambiguous and less overtly romantic. The deletion changed the dynamics of the film significantly because Elgin's character becomes less of a romantic interest and more of a suspicious figure in Quinn's investigation. What was meant to be a complex relationship involving attraction, class differences, and conflicting loyalties became a more straightforward element of the mystery plot. The scene's removal represents a frustrating example of how studio caution and audience prejudice can sanitize films and remove complicated human relationships in favor of safer, less challenging content. It also shows that even with a black star like Denzel Washington at the peak of his powers and popularity, Hollywood still felt audiences wouldn't accept seeing him in an interracial romance, a barrier that would take several more years to fully break down in mainstream cinema. Fact 7. 3 Marleys in the cast. The Mighty Quinn features an incredible piece of reggae royalty that most viewers never notice because the Marley family members appear in small but meaningful roles throughout the film. Rita Marley, who was Bob Marley's widow and had been one of the I-Three's backup singers during Bob's peak years, appears in a cameo role as a wedding singer in one of the film's Caribbean celebration scenes. But the Marley presence doesn't stop there, because 2 of Bob and Rita's daughters also appear in the film, creating a 3-generation reggae dynasty moment that went largely uncelebrated at the time. Cedella Marley and Sharon Marley both appear on screen performing alongside Cheryl Lee Ralph, who plays Quinn's wife Lola in the movie. The sisters were carrying on their father's musical legacy while also building their own careers in music, and their appearance in The Mighty Quinn gave them exposure to American audiences who might not have been familiar with their work. Having 3 Marleys in the cast wasn't just a casting coup for the filmmakers, it was also a way of ensuring authentic Jamaican and Caribbean cultural representation in a Hollywood production that was being shot on location in Jamaica. The Marley family's involvement helped ground the film in genuine Caribbean music and culture rather than relying on stereotypical or inauthentic representations that often plagued Hollywood's attempts to depict island life. Bob Marley had died in 1981, just 7 years before the film was shot, so his widow and daughters appearing in a major American film set in Jamaica felt like a way of honoring his legacy and keeping his cultural impact alive. The fact that most audiences had no idea they were watching multiple members of reggae's most famous family speaks to how subtle and natural their performances were, blending into the fabric of the film rather than standing out as celebrity cameos. Fact 8. A James Bond Easter egg. The Mighty Quinn contains a deliberate homage to the James Bond franchise that film buffs and Bond fans immediately recognized as a playful tribute to one of cinema's most iconic scenes. At one point in the film, 3 blind men appear tapping their way through a scene with their walking sticks, which seems like a random detail until you realize it's a direct reference to Dr. No from 1962, the very first James Bond film ever made. In that groundbreaking spy thriller, 3 blind assassins pretend to be blind beggars while actually working as killers, tapping their way through Jamaica with canes while planning to murder Bond. The scene became one of the most memorable moments in the entire Bond franchise because of its unexpected creepiness and the clever subversion of using characters who appear helpless as dangerous threats. Director Carl Schenkel and his team decided to include this reference in The Mighty Quinn, partly because both films are set in Jamaica and share similar Caribbean atmospheres, but also as a knowing wink to film history buffs who would catch the connection. The decision to include this Easter egg also serves as an acknowledgement that the Mighty Quinn is working in a similar genre tradition as the Bond films, mixing mystery, danger, exotic locations, and charismatic leading men navigating complex plots. While the Mighty Quinn is less fantastical and more grounded than Bond's adventures, both franchises celebrate Caribbean culture and use island settings as essential elements of their storytelling rather than just exotic backdrops. The Three Blind Men reference shows that the filmmakers were aware of cinema history and wanted to pay respect to what came before while creating something new. It's the kind of subtle detail that enhances the film for viewers who recognize it, while not distracting those who don't, which is exactly how the best homages should work. Fact 9. Folly Mansion's legendary ruin. The climactic helicopter crash scene in The Mighty Quinn was filmed at one of Jamaica's most fascinating and mysterious landmarks, a location with its own legendary backstory that rivals anything in the movie's plot. The Folly Ruins, located in Port Antonio, Jamaica, served as the dramatic setting for the film's action-packed finale, and the location wasn't just chosen for its visual appeal, but for the eerie authenticity of its decay. The mansion was originally built around 1900 by a wealthy American businessman who wanted to create a tropical paradise estate overlooking the Caribbean Sea. According to local legend, which has been passed down through generations but never fully verified, the mansion crumbled and fell into ruins because seawater was accidentally or intentionally used to mix the concrete during construction instead of fresh water. The salt in the seawater supposedly weakened the concrete's structural integrity over time, causing the mansion to deteriorate rapidly and become uninhabitable within just a few decades of being completed. Whether this story is true or simply an embellished tale that grew over the years remains debated by historians and engineers, but the ruins themselves are undeniably real and dramatic. By the time The Mighty Quinn filmed there in 1988, the Folly Ruins had become a haunting skeleton of columns, archways, and crumbling walls overtaken by tropical vegetation, creating a perfect atmosphere of decay and danger for the film's climax. The decision to stage a helicopter crash at this location added another layer of destruction to a site already symbolizing the failure of ambitious construction and human hubris. The mansion's story mirrors themes in the film about corruption, shortcuts taken for profit, and the eventual collapse of structures built on weak foundations, making it a symbolically perfect location choice beyond just its visual appeal. Today, the Folly Ruins remain a tourist attraction in Jamaica, famous both for their mysterious history and their appearance in The Mighty Quinn. Fact 10. Denzel's unexpected musical debut. Denzel Washington surprised audiences and showcased a hidden talent in The Mighty Quinn that few people knew he possessed, and that he's rarely displayed on screen before or since. In one memorable scene, Washington's character Xavier Quinn sits down at a piano and performs "Cakewalk into Town" by blues musician Taj Mahal, singing and playing the instrument with genuine skill and feeling. This wasn't a dubbed performance or a case of the actor miming while someone else provided the actual music. Washington genuinely played piano and sang the song himself, marking one of the only times in his entire film career that audiences got to hear him perform music on camera. The moment serves multiple purposes in the film beyond just showcasing Washington's versatility. It reveals Quinn as a multi-dimensional character who has artistic sensibilities and cultural depth beyond his role as a police officer, showing audiences that he's connected to the island's musical heritage and creative spirit. The scene also provides a quiet, intimate moment that contrasts with the tension and action surrounding it, giving Washington a chance to display a different kind of charisma and vulnerability than what he shows in the investigation scenes. What makes this performance even more remarkable is that Washington didn't extensively promote or discuss his musical abilities after the film's release, meaning many of his fans today have no idea he can play piano and sing. The song choice itself is significant because Taj Mahal's music blends blues, reggae, and Caribbean influences, perfectly matching the film's cultural setting and themes. Washington's delivery of the song feels natural and unforced rather than showy, suggesting that he had genuine musical training or ability, rather than just learning this one song for the film. In the decades since The Mighty Quinn, Washington has built one of the most respected careers in Hollywood history, winning multiple Oscars and becoming one of the greatest actors of his generation. But he's never again performed musically on screen in such an extended way. Fact 11. The Swiss director's only Hollywood hit. Karl Schenkel arrived in Hollywood as a complete unknown to American audiences and critics, yet somehow managed to create one of the most acclaimed films of 1989 before disappearing back into relative obscurity. Schenkel was a Swiss director who had built a successful career making commercials and working in European television. But The Mighty Quinn marked his American theatrical debut and his first chance to work with major Hollywood stars and studio resources. When the film premiered, even influential critics like Roger Ebert admitted they had never heard of Karl Schenkel before watching The Mighty Quinn, which makes Ebert's enthusiastic review even more impressive. Ebert declared the film one of the year's best, praising Schenkel's ability to balance mystery, character development, cultural authenticity, and entertainment value in ways that more experienced Hollywood directors often failed to achieve. The fact that a commercial director from Switzerland with no track record in American cinema could arrive and immediately earn such high praise speaks to Schenkel's natural storytelling instincts and his skill at working with actors to create genuine performances. What makes Schenkel's achievement even more remarkable is that The Mighty Quinn remained his only significant Hollywood success, despite the critical acclaim. He directed a few more films after this, including some thrillers and television movies, but never again reached the level of recognition or quality that The Mighty Quinn represented. It's unclear whether Schenkel chose to return to European work or whether Hollywood simply didn't offer him the opportunities his talent deserved. But his career trajectory remains one of cinema's puzzling mysteries. The Mighty Quinn stands as proof that great filmmaking can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes an outsider's fresh perspective can produce better results than industry veterans who are stuck in conventional approaches. Schenkel's work on the film shows sophisticated understanding of pacing, atmosphere, and character that many established directors never master. Fact 12. $10,000 bills were real. One of The Mighty Quinn's key plot devices involves rare $10,000 bills that serve as evidence in the murder investigation, and viewers might assume this was a fictional creation for dramatic purposes, but these enormous denomination bills actually existed in American currency history. The United States Treasury genuinely issued $10,000 bills as legal tender, along with even larger denominations, including $5,000, $100,000, and, believe it or not, $100,000 bills. These massive bills were printed between the 1920s and 1950s, primarily used for large transactions between banks and financial institutions rather than everyday commerce. Obviously, ordinary citizens weren't walking around with $10,000 bills in their wallets to buy groceries or pay rent. The bills featured the portrait of Salmon P. Chase, who served as Treasury Secretary under President Abraham Lincoln and later became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. By 1969, the federal government officially removed these high-denomination bills from circulation, partly because they were rarely used for legitimate purposes and partly because they had become favorite tools for money laundering and organized crime. When criminals wanted to move large amounts of cash without carrying suspicious briefcases full of smaller bills, $10,000 notes were perfect for transporting significant wealth in a compact form. The decision to use these bills as a plot element in The Mighty Quinn adds historical authenticity to the story, while also suggesting connections to organized crime and illegal financial activity that tie into the film's themes of corruption and hidden wealth. Anyone discovering $10,000 bills in 1989 would immediately know they were dealing with either very old money or illegal operations, since the bills had been out of circulation for 20 years by the time the film was made. Today, the few remaining $10,000 bills are valuable collector's items worth far more than their face value. Fact 13. Author was a presidential advisor. Albert Z. Carr had one of the most unusual backgrounds for a mystery novelist, bringing real-world experience with power and politics that informed Finding Maubie in ways that typical crime writers couldn't match. Carr wasn't a career novelist or someone who spent his life writing detective fiction. He was primarily an economist who worked at the highest levels of American government, serving as an advisor to two of the most consequential presidents in United States history. During the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration in the 1930s and 40s, Carr was brought in to help develop economic policies during both the Great Depression recovery and World War II mobilization, giving him insider access to how power really operates at the federal level. He continued his government service during the Harry S. Truman presidency in the late 1940s and early 1950s, advising on post-war economic reconstruction and Cold War financial strategy. This background gave Carr intimate knowledge of corruption, bureaucracy, political compromises, and the ways that powerful people manipulate systems to protect their interests, all of which seeps into Finding Mobby, despite its seemingly simple setting of a small Caribbean island. The novel's portrayal of how corruption functions in Xavier Quinn's island community, how local officials balance loyalty to friends against duty to justice, and how economic interests drive political decisions all reflect Carr's decades of watching similar dynamics play out at the presidential level. What makes Carr's story even more interesting is that he wrote Finding Mobby as his first and only mystery novel late in his career, apparently deciding to try fiction as a way of exploring themes he'd observed during his years in government, but in a more entertaining and accessible format than academic economic writing. The fact that his sole attempt at crime fiction won the Edgar Award for Best First Mystery Novel suggests that his understanding of human nature and power structures translated remarkably well into storytelling. Fact 14. A Goin' Down Road actually exists. One of the Mighty Quinn's seemingly throwaway details turns out to be based on a genuine Jamaican traffic practice that most viewers probably assumed was fictional exaggeration for comedic effect. The film references Goin' Down Road, which is the local term for mountain roads that operate as one-way routes during specific times of day due to the narrowness and danger of the terrain. This isn't made up for the movie, it's an actual traffic management system that Jamaica has used on certain mountainous roads where the paths are too narrow for two-way traffic to safely pass. During designated hours, traffic is only allowed to travel downhill, while at other times the flow reverses and vehicles can only go uphill, preventing dangerous head-on collisions on blind curves and steep grades. The practice developed organically over years of Jamaican drivers navigating treacherous mountain roads that were built long before modern safety standards existed, and it relies on both official scheduling and local knowledge passed down through communities. Tourists and outsiders who don't understand the Goin' Down Road system often find themselves confused or even driving the wrong way during restricted hours, creating exactly the kind of chaotic and humorous situations that the film depicts. The decision to include this detail in the Mighty Quinn shows the filmmaker's commitment to authentic Caribbean culture and local practices, rather than relying solely on stereotypical island imagery of beaches and reggae music. It's the kind of specific cultural detail that gives the film texture and believability, suggesting that the characters inhabit a real place with its own history and practical adaptations to geography rather than a generic tropical setting. The Goin' Down Road system also serves as a metaphor for the way island communities develop their own rules and systems that might seem strange to outsiders, but make perfect sense to locals who understand the context. This mirrors Xavier Quinn's position as someone who understands both the formal law enforcement system and the unwritten rules of island life. Fact 15. Film rights cost only $75,000. The financial details behind the Mighty Quinn's production reveal that A&M Films managed to acquire the movie rights to an Edgar Award-winning novel for an astonishingly small amount of money, even by late 1980s standards. In 1988, the studio paid only $75,000 to secure the rights to Finding Mobby, which seems almost impossible considering the novel had won the prestigious Edgar Award for Best First Mystery Novel more than 15 years earlier. For context, successful novels and bestsellers in the 1980s typically commanded film rights prices in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars range, especially if they came with built-in name recognition and critical acclaim. A literary award winner should have been worth significantly more than $75,000, which raises questions about why the rights were available so cheaply. Part of the explanation might be that the novel was 16 years old by the time A&M bought the rights, meaning it had been off bookstore shelves for over a decade and wasn't fresh in the public's mind. Additionally, Albert Carr died in 1971 and never built a successful writing career beyond that one novel, so there was no author platform or promotional machine to drive up the property's value. The novel's estate or heirs may have been happy to accept a relatively modest payment for a property that had been sitting unused since the failed Sammy Davis Jr. production attempt in the early 1970s. Still, $75,000 for an Edgar-winning property represents one of the better bargains in Hollywood adaptation history. The studio essentially got a fully developed story with compelling characters, an exotic setting, and critical validation for less than what many studios paid for untested spec scripts from unknown writers. The low acquisition cost meant that The Mighty Quinn could be made more profitably even with moderate box office returns, making it a smarter financial investment than many expensive literary adaptations that must earn back huge rights payments before showing any profit.